is actually the whole move behind interest in corporate social responsibility, and as I say, it's moved towards corporate responsibility, all linked increasingly into trust. And also with that, we can see the change in the thinking and the change in the drivers behind it. So very much in the early years, it was all about inspiring people, and to be fair, a lot of it was PR, doesn't this feel good, and doesn't it look right? Right the way through to where we are now, and what we'll share with you, I think the challenges of integrating it and breaking down, to be honest, the corporate silos that exist within organizations that stop that joined up connected thinking.
This is all about leadership. It's not about being in support of leadership, it's about being leaders.
What are we seeing from the C-suite, the chief executive, that they want from your function? And they want to ensure, as already been said, that reputation is an effective lever and absolutely a source of value. But what they definitely want is a much earlier, more explicit and structured contribution to strategy.
And actually, that's where we need to be. We can't be standing on the sidelines. Leadership is not about them, it's about us. There are three key priorities that we see over and over again for the Chief Communication Officer, and that is supporting business growth, promoting and protecting the company reputation, and driving the company's values and culture.
What are the implications of the rapid run-through of what I'm seeing from our research in the US and in Europe? Absolutely, that corporate communications has much more enhanced data and intelligence. And the key issue here is that it provides decision-ready reputation information. It's information that not only informs decisions and thinking within communications, it informs decisions thinking in the C-suite, in other functions, and in business units. But what people are also looking for is to surround themselves with people who can bring geopolitical advice, you can bring technological advice, you can bring social advice. So they're looking to be able to sit at the boardroom table, not only with data, not only with their own judgment, but with these intelligence and perspectives behind them.
The way in which leadership encourages and fosters the engagement of the whole workforce right the way down to the operating unit level is critically important, and there has to be something in this about values, about walking the talk, and about engaging them not just in mind but also in heart. Now that is a very big ask for hard-nosed business people who are extremely busy, but unless the frontline operating units understand why this is important for their business and then buy into it and build it into their business, frankly it's just going to be window dressing and the company will be found out.
For us to really help our corporations, we have to be comfortable and able to raise our hand and say, you might want to do it, but you better not.
Global is essentially the new local. If I go back to 2000, where about 40% of our turnover was in Europe, 30% of it in the US, we've seen in a decade a 50-50 split. So we're increasingly seeing the biggest growth coming from developing and emerging markets.
One of the issues of globalization that companies are now seeing is that their organizations are so far-flung that the Chief Communication Officer very seldom really has their finger totally on the pulse. It's almost impossible now.
If I go back 5 or 6 years ago, issues were managed at a very localized level, and that's essentially still the core proposition that we have. But our ability to contain issues to the local level has essentially slipped away. Within 24 hours, a story will go from one country, one region, to global.
When US Airways had a jet leaving New York LaGuardia Airport, it hit a flock of geese and ended up having to land in the Hudson River. Elise Elberwein, the Chief Communications Officer of US Airways, learned about this incident because she got a text from a reporter at CNN who had picked up a tweet from someone who'd been on the scene.
And trust is at the heart of all. As I said, we started from a CSR perspective. And increasingly we saw how all of this fits into, fundamentally, trust is at the core of it. And I don't need to go into the declines of trust and the issues around trust out there in the market. But what does this mean? And this whole thing of, we do as we say. How do people check on that? How do they assess that? But also right the way through to this lovely quote saying, trust stops consumer promiscuity. If they know, if they understand, if they value the product and service and the organization behind it, then they're more likely to stay loyal. And the whole issue where we're moving from a shareholder-centric to a much broader stakeholder-centric approach.
Leadership, management, workplace, marketplace and supply chain. Those are the areas where the company has direct control. Those are the areas where the company is clearly responsible for its actions. And those are the areas where reputation is won and lost primarily, and where trust is fundamentally built. And there are the most damaging places for trust to be broken and for reputation to be destroyed.
Trust, the currency of business and all relationships, is at an all-time low.
There has been a breakdown of trust in governments particularly.
I just want to share with you a quote that I think really shines a light on what we're talking about. Abraham Lincoln, who said, "Character is like a tree, reputation like a shadow." The shadow is what we think of it. The tree is the real thing. And for a long, long time, as communicators, we were focused on the shadow. How big could we make it? How much could we shine a bright light on it to make the shadow bigger? From what angle will we pitch the shadow? And we recognize now that what we need to tend to, the roots of it all, is the tree.
What is brand management? It's called make a promise, keep a promise. Because if you act, make a promise, keep a promise, and you get your organizations to do the same thing, believe me, trust will follow.
Partnership is also at the core of what we do. Not only does business need to collaborate with other businesses, but perhaps critically, it must work with government and civil society to address the challenges.
Governments at an international level seem to fail. Therefore, there's been a transfer of that responsibility towards the business sector, particularly multinationals. There's an expectation that multinationals can address global issues like climate change. We believe very strongly that sustainability is ultimately going to become part of the mainstream way of doing business, and we're being increasingly challenged both by our consumers and also by our customers to integrate and address sustainability within our business models.
The very nature of the sustainability challenges is that they are not just for business, they are not business alone, they affect us all.
We're driven a lot by innovation, and one of the challenges that we see is that science and new technology is often pushing the boundaries somewhat faster than consumer acceptance of those new technologies. Many issues are interconnected, so it's very, very difficult to deal with a specific issue in isolation. And I think the word crisis management is a word that we're no longer using at Unilever. Because crisis management to me means you're already in a crisis. The real objective of an issues management process is actually to prevent crises from arising.
Risk management is around identifying unique risks that might not be addressed anywhere else. There is a sense that if you can bring stakeholder perceptions, intelligence, trends, if you can bring predictive data to the risk process, it's going to enhance risk management, and they're likely to be risks that the standard enterprise risk management, business risk management process won't have brought up.
The way that you can use issues management, if you do it well, is you can actually use it to differentiate your company in terms of its corporate reputation, but more importantly, you can use it as a driver of competitive advantage.
I think success is based on actually understand who your stakeholders are. Understand who they are, what their issues are, what their personal agendas are, where they want to go. Really listen and hear what's being said. It's not always the words that are being used. Manage the reality gap. There's always some difference between what you say or do and what they perceive as being the outcome. Communicate. If you don't talk to people, they won't understand, they won't come with you.
Sustainable behaviour really does drive trust, but also, really importantly, sustainable behaviour drives and inspires innovation. And when we're looking at the challenges around growth, what does that mean? This is not just a nice to have, this is a business fundamental.